Excellent. So good evening, everyone. I wanted to carry on the sugya of dosh, and today's topic, really based on, I hope you've managed to see at least some of the source sheets, is going to try and focus on what the difference is between dosh and boireh. So there are two fairly similar melachos. The Gemara actually, one sugya down, is going to talk about the difference between zoreh, boireh, and meraked. That's not our topic. All those three melachos are all to do with separating some form of taroves, some form of mixture, the oichel and the psodas. That's not what we're talking about. We spoke about that when we learned the melacha of boireh. Today I want to deal with something more fundamental, which is what is the difference between dosh, which is threshing and separating the grain, and the oichel. How is that different from boireh, which is separating the chaff and the oichel? These are seemingly the identical melachos. And what started off, I thought, as a fairly simple sugya, very quickly became an absolutely fascinating one. So I hope in today's show I'll manage to share the excitement I feel about this topic. It's very, very interesting how it plays out, and it was something that I never really understood till I relearned the sugya now. Some of the sources we'll look at inside. Some of them I'll just share with you. I should again reiterate that a lot of my knowledge, I'm going to quote various achronim over the course of this year. A lot of these are not my own general knowledge. They're simply things that I saw cited in other sources, and they referenced me to have a look at this. Unfortunately, I don't have that sort of knowledge that I know it all myself, but I just want to make that clear. So the sugya starts with the Rabbeinu Chananel, which I put on the sheets, and Rabbeinu Chananel really answers our question. So we might think that the sugya ends with that. Rabbeinu Chananel says, Hadosh, hu hamafarik hapasoles hamachaberes ba'oichel. Dosh is when you dismantle the psoles, which is mechubar, which is joined and attached to the oichel, umchinosom libreira, and you prepare it for either for breira or kavara or barkoda, for one of the various methods of sifting and separating foods apart. Amenafet, there's no fates afuris, mena oichel, etc., that you separate off the afuris. Then he carries on, nimtza, zoreh, boireh, meraked. In zoreh, boireh, meraked, kulon ma'avirim psoles hamoreves ba'oichel. In all of them, you are separating the psodas, which is mixed, hamoreves ba'oichel, the eina mechaberes, but it's not joined. You're going klipa shetzricha lepiruk, as opposed to a shell which needs dismantling. So the Rabbeinu Chananel says that the difference between the melachos which are dosh, or it's told us, like menafet and mefarik, is that they are attached, as opposed to boireh, they are merely mixed. So that sounds very simple. Dosh is when you are detaching, and boireh is when you are separating a mixture. Now, I have a series of questions on this Rabbeinu Chananel, which demonstrate to us that the issue is more complicated than we might think at first glance when we read the Rabbeinu Chananel. And I'm going to argue that he means something a little more subtle than is apparent at first glance. So first of all, a conceptual question over here, which is, I understand that dosh, it's legitimate to say that what makes something dosh is only when it's attached. I mean, that's what threshing is. You are mefarik, you are dismantling an attachment, you're removing the shell in order to get to it. So I get it. Dosh is dismantling, as opposed to boireh when there's no dismantling. So if you're just separating a mixture without dismantling, that's not dosh, because dosh means dismantling. That way around I understand. But the other way around I don't completely understand, which is what makes dosh not also be a boireh? Because in every dosh you're doing separation plus. You're not just separating a mixture, but you're separating something that's joined. So I understand why boireh isn't dosh. When I'm just separating a mixture, I'm not detaching and breaking things apart. I get it, that's boireh, not dosh. But here, what's the answer to the other question? Why isn't every dosh also a boireh? Because I'm not just, when I'm dismantling something, I'm also separating the psoles and the oichel. Now, on face value, the answer may be that that is correct. Every dosh is super boireh. But maybe that's what the melacha is. Maybe the melacha is super borah, and it's not borah, therefore. What makes it not borah is because I'm doing more than borah, I'm dismantling. So why isn't it dosh plus borah? Maybe the answer is because since it's one result that I'm achieving, I have to make up my mind which melacha it is, and it's the melacha of dosh, not the melacha of borah. However, at least in practical halacha, we see that this principle of the rach is not so clear-cut, and what I've just said isn't accurate. And this is the Ramah brought in the Shulchan Aruch, which is really actually Yerushalmi. And the Ramah says in the Shulchan Aruch, this is the source, I printed this source here, he says, you're not allowed to peel onions and garlics when you're peeling to put them aside. But if you're peeling them in order to eat immediately, that is mutter. Now, the Mishnah Berurah comments on this, that the issue with peeling onions and garlic is borah, and that's why the heter of la'alta would apply. Because those who remember when we learned Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, when we learned the sugya of borah, will know that there's a heter in borah. There's various conditions to this allowance, but at least one of the conditions is that if you are being borah in order to eat immediately, this is an act of achila, this isn't an act of borah. So let's say all three conditions are in place. That is, I'm doing a borah in order to have immediate use, I'm doing it biyad with my hands, not with an implement, and it's oichel metoch psodas, I'm separating the oichel, not the psodas. Then we conceptualize this as this is simply an act of achila, this is an act of eating, this isn't a malacha of borah. I'm simply doing an act of eating, not a malacha of borah. Now this allowance applies to borah, it does not apply to dosh. And the reason it applies to borah, not to dosh, is because borah is close enough to the act of achila that it can be shifted from being a malacha to being a mere act of eating if I do it with the conditions fulfilled of using my hands and oichel metoch psodas and miyad, etc. Whereas dosh is too much of a manufacturing malacha or an agricultural malacha for the heter of derech achila to apply. Okay, but that's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and this is how the Mishnah Berurah understands it. And indeed, in truth, this is really Yerushalmi. But for our purposes, bottom line, we see that peeling a shell, the peel of garlic or onion, is the melacha of borah. In which case, we come back to our question that we initially asked, which is why is every disha not also a borah? After all, it's true that I'm detaching, but I am also doing a borah in so doing. And we see that peeling, detaching the shell, the casing, from an onion or a garlic is considered borah in this Yerushalmi, in this Shulchan Aruch. So that's the question that is bothering us here with the Rabbeinu Chananel. Before I go further, I'll just pause in case anyone wants to say anything.
Just to clarify, in the Biur Halacha, there are two people who strike out the this Yerushalmi, or from the Yerushalmi, and one time it says the Rambam, and later on it says it's the Ramah. Is there a misprint, or are they both of them who take it out?
I believe it's both. Can you just refer me to the line that you're...
The line is the Rambam. It's the second last line of the first page in the Biur Halacha. B'da'ato le'echo le'alta afla pele ala Rambam shehishmit haydina.
Yes, and then where's the next one?
There was another one which was later on. I could just find it. I'm just taking. I saw another one. Sorry I don't want to delay you, but there was another one which said the Ramah.
You know, right at the end of the Shittim Gratz, he misses out the Ramah.
Yes, right.
Yeah, no, so that's referring to a different din. I'll take this off group.
Okay, sorry.
The last line in the Biur is referring to another din.
Okay, sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, no, fine. The Rambam misses out because the source of this is Yerushalmi, and for whatever reason, the Rambam doesn't paskin like this Yerushalmi. But for our purposes, what we've learned is that peeling garlic is meleches borah, not meleches. Despite Rabbeinu Chananel, you see that peeling barley is a meleches borah, in which case we wonder, why is every dosh not also a meleches borah? Now, sorry, just lost my notes here. Apologies. Now, a simple answer to this question would be that after every dosh, the simplest answer to the question would be that the reason why every dosh is not also a borah is because after every dosh, one still has a tarovis, a mixture. In other words, that's the whole process that you go through in which you do dosh and then you do zorah, borah, and maraked. The process of disha cracks open the shell and removes the chibur. However, it doesn't separate the taroves that exists. So we're now in fallback position number 2. Already not quite in the world of the Rabbeinu Chananel, that the reason why every dosh isn't a borah, suggestion number 2, isn't simply because it's not mechubar, because not mechubar would explain why borah isn't dosh, because dosh is when you're cracking things open, but you're still also doing a separation. Maybe the answer to the question is because in borah you're doing a separation of the mixture, whereas in dosh you're separating the chibur, but it's still remaining mixed. This would be a potential answer to understand why every dosh is not a borah. However, this also doesn't seem to work. And here we come to the source that I printed on the second page, which is, in fact, even let's look at the third page over here for now, which is a Gemara later on in Daf Kuf Mem Daled Amud Beis. And the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says that when you squeeze a fruit, if you squeeze the fruit straight into other food, there's no melacha of there's no melacha over there of mafarik, of dosh. And the reason is because you've never separated it into something else. Because if you squeeze juice, maybe let me start from the beginning. When you squeeze juice out of a fruit, the Gemara understands that you have done sochet, squeezing, which is a tolda of the melacha of dosh or mafarik. How so? Because you had the fruit absorbed within the juice absorbed within the flesh of the fruit, and by squeezing the fruit, you're separating the juice out from the fruit, which is detaching the juice from the fruit, and therefore this is the melacha of dosh. And the Gemara says that if you separate the juice out of the fruit and just squeeze it to produce juice, in that case you are chayav for doing the melacha of sochet. However, if you squeeze the juice straight into a food, for example, you take a lemon and squeeze it straight into a fish, so that the juice never exists as an independent entity, effectively, all you've done is mafrid oichel meochel. You've separated food from food. The juice goes from being absorbed in the lemon to being absorbed in the fish, and therefore you're not chayav because of dosh. Now, again, here we confront the same problem. It's true that there's no melacha of dosh because of this svara, but separating food, two different sorts of food from food, is the melacha of borah. So again, over there, I want to ask the same question, which is what isn't borah about separating the juice from the fruit? Seemingly, you do two melachas when you squeeze juice from fruit. You do the melacha of dosh, which is extracting, mafarik, and you also do the melacha of borah, which is separating because you're separating the fruit from the juice. In brief, without going into the lomdos of the Gemara and Kuf Mem Daled, just for the sake of clarity, what you see from that Gemara is that squeezing fruit, juice from fruit, is the melacha of dosh, and we're left wondering why isn't it also the melacha of borah? Because after all, you are separating the fruit from the juice from the fruit, and therefore it should be a melacha of borah. Now, a possible answer to this question is that borah applies when you separate two different species, two different types of things, not when you separate things which are identical. You can't do borah by splitting off, cutting a piece of chicken into two, or separating off two pieces of identical food. In which case, maybe this isn't the reason this isn't the melacha of borah is because the fruit and the juice are considered one. Now, this also isn't such a simple answer in borah, because after all, when you squeeze a fruit, the juice comes out of the fruit, and you're left behind the peel and the pips and the dried fruit body of the fruit, which has had the juice extracted from it. And seemingly this should be a classic case of separating psoles and oichel. You split it into two. So we're now in the world of trying to analyze borer, but what we're trying to understand is what makes borer not dosh, and we're trying to understand why is squeezing fruit not borer. We're using this as a way of trying to understand what the gather of dosh is. We're not really here learning the subject of borer. We're trying to understand though what is dosh, and what is it about squeezing fruit that makes it dosh, not borer. Our first attempt at an answer was because dosh is when you're, answer number one is the Rabbeinu Chananel. Fruit which is things which are joined, it's dosh. When you're detaching, when you're merely separating, it's borer. That doesn't seem to work in svara, because what would make borer all dosh, not also be borer? And also we saw that when you peel an onion, the Yerushalmi, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, says explicitly that this is the melacha of borer. Attempt number two, maybe the melacha of dosh is when you are threshing without separating the good from the bad, and borer is when you also remove the mixture. This doesn't seem to work from the case of squeezing fruit, which is treated only as the melacha of dosh, not the melacha of borer. Answer number three, maybe it's not borer because it's separating food from food, because juice and fruit are the same thing. It also doesn't appear to be correct because you're left behind the shell of the fruit, the inedible dry bits of fruit, and you've extracted the edible, enjoyable juice from this mixture. There is, however, a possible answer to this question which gets into the technicality of borer, which may be mean that we haven't found here a good crowbar to crack open what's really going on in dosh and borer. There may be a technical answer to the question. And this technical answer is found in the Prima Godim. I mentioned already this is not my own idea. I saw the Prima Godim quoted. Prima Godim, very important posik in Shulchan Aruch. And he says that the definition of borer, a very interesting idea, not something we discussed when we learned borer, I missed this point, is the separation of oichel from psoles. You have inedible and edible, and I separate them. It isn't when through the process of what I'm doing in the melacha, I'm making an oichel and psoles. So with the fruit, there is no oichel and psoles. You just have the body of the fruit, the flesh of the fruit, which is a perfectly good oichel. The squeezing process converts this into an oichel and a psoles, and therefore this doesn't come under the category of borer. I'm not separating oichel and psoles, I'm creating an oichel and psoles through the process of squeezing it, and therefore he argues, the Prima Godim, that this doesn't come under the category of borer. This is only dosh, in which I'm separating and breaking things apart, but not an act of borer. So this is a possible get-out clause from this problem over here. Maybe with fruit, it isn't borer because the fruit is just fruit, it's all oichel. It's true once I squeeze it, I now have an oichel and psoles left behind, but I didn't separate. I didn't have a mixture of oichel and psoles. Before I squeeze it, it was all oichel. After I squeeze it, I create an oichel and psoles, but by that point they're separated. Nonetheless, we're not out of the woods. We're still in trouble because the same Gemara there in Kuf Mem Daled also talks about cholev, milking. Now in cholev, milking, I do have two separate things. I've got the milk and I've got the animal, and therefore seemingly in that case, why shouldn't I be chayiv because of borer? Because there I'm separating the milk from the animal, and now I have two separate types, two separate things. In which case, why shouldn't this also be the melacha of borer? So to reiterate, to summarize where we're up to, we again don't understand what it is that makes something only dosh, not borer. There may be technical reasons why squeezing a fruit is dosh, not borer. As we explained with the squeezing the fruit, you don't have two separate things, you create it through the process. But with milking, it doesn't appear to be the case. It seems that you already have the milk, you already have the animal, and you're separating two separate things. So this was...
And we've still got a question, presumably, Rabbi Zobin, on the peeling as well. Why isn't peeling also dosh? Because we see it's clearly borer, and that seems very similar to our Rashi of Pishtar, Megivulin, etc.
No, absolutely, yes. What on earth is the difference between the case of the shum and the garlic and the case of dosh? Why indeed is peeling the peel of the garlic or the onion not dosh? So both ways around, we don't understand. In fact, I mean, just to bring out the question in its starkest form, if the Rach says that the formula to use is it mechuba or not mechuba, is it joined or not joined, then under that criteria, the onion and garlic should count as dosh, not boira, because it's mechuba. So at this point here, we're in a very serious confusion about what defines the difference between boira and dosh, both ways round. How do we align the two together? So the question of why the garlic is boira, not dosh, is actually addressed by the poskim on the Shulchan Aruch, and I think I put this in the source sheets. And they say an answer which isn't that clear cut. They say that the klippa, the shell of the barley of the shum, is bottle to the pre. It's insignificant. It's nullified to the garlic and the onion, and therefore this doesn't count as dosh. Somehow not a significant enough shell. So the fruit, the grain has a proper shell around it, which I need to crack open to get to the grain. That's the melachot of dosh. However, merely peeling off the layers of an onion is not a significant enough peel. It's bottled to the fruit, and therefore this isn't dosh. So says Rabbi Kiva Eger. And again, we're left wondering, what on earth does that svara mean? I mean, what's going on over here? What's the concept that Rabbi Kiva Eger is trying to teach us in understanding what defines dosh and boira? And I think the answer to the question is as follows, and this I think is a very beautiful idea. It seems that the definition of dosh is when you are creating something new, meaning to say the fruit, the food item didn't exist. The form of the fruit wasn't in existence prior to the dosh. And in the process of dosh, the logic of dosh is, I'm not merely separating it. It's not that I had the fruit and I had something else, and it was a taroiva, so it was a mixture, and I need to sort out the mixture. That's the melacha of boireh. Over here, I'm creating something. I'm mefarik. I'm dismantling something to bring something new and separate into existence that was previously joined and therefore didn't exist independently. I'm bringing a new existence into being, which wasn't there independently previously, and is through the separation is now coming into existence. And I think that answers all the various scenarios of dosh that we meet, and I've tried to share with you in the various cases. So let's take some of the easier examples. In the case of squeezing fruit juice, I think we hear very well now why this is the melacha of dosh, not the melacha of boireh. Boireh means when I have something, a food in existence, and it's mixed up and I separate it. With fruit juice, I'm creating the fruit juice through the process of squeezing, so therefore that counts as dosh, not as boireh. Even in the case of cholev, of milking, it is true that the milk is in some sense already stored in the cow. However, it doesn't exist as an independent entity, and therefore the process of milking detaches it from the cow and brings it into its form, into its presence, its existence in the accessible world, and therefore this counts as the melacha of dosh, of mefarik, not the melacha of boireh. I'm not just separating a mixture, I'm bringing something new into existence. Separating a grain from its shell, this is Rabbi Kiva Eger's argument, is a significant thing. It grew inside the shell, it's wrapped inside the shell, it's part of a plant until I separate it and crack it out of the shell, at which point it becomes a grain, and therefore again I'm bringing something new into existence. Merely peeling an onion is something different. I'm peeling an onion. The onion is already there. It's simply covered with a natural peel, and therefore I'm not bringing something new into existence. I'm just simply removing the peel of the onion, not creating something new. And it seems to me that this is really the depth of what the Rabbeinu Chananel meant when he spoke about the chiluk between mechuba, joined, and tarovis, a mixture. I don't think he just meant whether it's technically joined or not, because then, as Adam pointed out, it'd be very strange. Why would the onion not be joined? The onion is joined. But as Rabbi Kiva Eger teaches us, with the onion is joined, it's true, but it's merely joined as a peel. You already have the onion in front of you. An onion has a peel covering, so you peel the peeling off, and then you get the onion underneath it. That's the onion. You're separating it into pieces. Whereas with the grain, the chaburah, the nature of the join is such that the grain only appears as a grain, it comes into existence as a separate grain through the process of dosh. So the process of dosh is bringing something new into existence. The process of boireh is a non-functional use because of the mixture, bringing it into functionality. And that seems the criteria of which would determine which melacha it is.
When Edward and I were discussing this, we thought it was analogous to Yeshiva-style tochen and the dust inside the tree, that exactly this, that it's creating something that never existed in the world before. It may have been there, but it wasn't an identifiable entity in its own right until you do the malacha, whether it's the tochen in the case of the tree or in this case the dash.
Yeah, I think that's a very good comparison. And I'm delighted you got there, that you and Ed were discussing this. This is absolutely right. So kol hakavod to you, because I think this is exactly the definition of dosh, that I'm bringing a new entity into existence.
Is there any question regarding, when we learned brachot, we said that the juice was zeya ba'alma. So in that sense, is that a stira? Because that would imply it's not a completely new thing.
No, I think it's exactly this idea, that previously the juice was part of the fruit, and therefore it wasn't that there was fruit plus juice, it was just the fruit. Whereas when I squeeze it, you now produce this juice, which wasn't in existence previously, and that's why squeezing a fruit is dosh, not bora. I think it's very analogous to that idea. It's not interdependent. I mean, you could say one without the other, but I think they're representing a similar line of thought.
Can bora apply to mashke at all?
That's a very interesting question. You're saying by definition, if mashke, well, if you just have two liquids,
I mean, in other words, I mean, you in a sense, one gets towards it by saying mashke haba la'ochel ochelhu. In other words, he's making a distinction there.
Yeah, because
you're on its own. You can't do bora with mashke.
No, I'm acknowledging your question. Mashke, which is absorbed in a solid,
it's fine.
It's absorbed.
Yeah.
And when it's separate from the solid, it is, and that's why when you squeeze, let's say, a liquid out of clothing, it's soichet, it's chita, it's not bora, because when it's absorbed, it's disappeared.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you had, for example, oil floating on top of water, and you poured off carefully the oil.
I was thinking of that.
Maybe then that would be it. I need to double check the halachas. I don't know. It's a very, very good question. But let's say normal cases, if two liquids literally mix, then they mix. So you have not a mixture, but they've become one. And if a liquid is absorbed in a solid, then again, you don't have a mixture, but it's become one. So you would always therefore be in dosh territory.
Yes, that's why I just wonder whether...
Yeah, very interesting point. Thank you.
Simply say. Yeah.
No, very, very nice point.
It's something to do with the edibility of the shell, because I mean I don't quite see the distinction, and where would say an orange come into it? I mean an orange is a thicker peel, and you could say it's mephoric, or you could say it's dosh, but maybe the edibility is a criteria. I mean an apple certainly one would think is you're not really mephoric because you can eat it without peeling it as well as with peeling it.
So there's two points to make. I don't know, and you are correct. There would be it seems to me intuitive that the peel of a onion or a garlic is not bringing something new into existence. I hear Rabbi Kivega's logic in which he says this is bottled to the fruit, and this is merely just peeling off a layer on top of the fruit as opposed to bringing the fruit into existence. But where one would set the boundary between the scenarios, I don't know. I can imagine all sorts of cases where it's not clear which one it is. But I think the point you're making about the apple, for example, is a very good example, because in the case of the apple, and the postscript really already pointed out, the peel is edible, and therefore, whilst the peel is joined onto the apple, you don't really have oichel and pasoles. You've just got oichel and oichel, and they're really just melachot. It's just part of the apple. It's the process of peeling which itself makes the apple peel into something different and into something inedible. And this really gets back to the Prima Godin that I mentioned previously, who says that bora is separating edible from inedible, not bringing the inedible into existence. And the very same Pri Megadim makes this point exactly with peeling apples. I'll give you the Maramokum. The Pri Megadim is in Simon Shin Kaf, Siv Cotton Zion, and he says exactly this point. He says in the case of he brings a Mogan Avram. He's going on a Mogan Avram. The Mogan Avram says that in the same way as you're not allowed to peel onions to leave them for later, you're also, because of Bora, you're also not allowed to peel an apple to leave it to later because of Bora. And the Pri Megadim asks exactly your point, Max. He says that the peel of an apple is edible, and therefore, how can you call this Bora? True, once I've peeled it, you discard it, but it's only after the peeling that you've created through the peeling process a pasoles which wasn't in existence previously. And therefore the Pri Megadim seems to understand that this would be neither Bora nor Dosh. So I think this is a good workable principle. I realise I've gone through a bunch of Mara Makomis over here, and maybe this show will need re-listening to or re-looking at the sources. But to summarise, the argument is very simple. The Rach, Rabbeinu Chananel, says that Dosh means when it's mechuba as opposed to Bora and it's just a mixture. It is true to say that in many cases, but not all cases, with Dosh, you merely separate and break things apart, but you don't sort out the mixture. However, this doesn't seem to be all that there is to say about the chiluk between the two. It seems that the point of Rabbeinu Chananel is that you are not just merely tidying up a mix where you have the object in existence and it's just not yet functional because it's mixed with other things. The point is you're creating something and bringing it out into the open, such as squeezing fruit, such as milking a cow, or such as literally breaking the shell open of the husk of a grain, as opposed to a situation in which maybe it's technically mechuba, but I'm merely peeling a peel off, but the fruit was already in existence, in which case this would be viewed as a taroves and it would be boyer. Max is absolutely right. I don't think it's easy to always determine which one it is, but the halachic concept we will need to ask ourselves is this a mixture even though it's attached, or is it a combined object which I'm dismantling, in which case it would be dosh. So we'll stop there for today, and